In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. So good morning, everyone. It's so good to be here with all of you today. And I've missed all of you, and so I'm glad to see you. Today is Pride Sunday, and I would like to talk to you about the first reading today. In 1984, the feminist biblical scholar Phyllis Tribble wrote a book called Texts of Terror. It's an important book that examines from a feminist perspective the most violent stories that have to do with women in the Bible. And this is an important lens in which we look at stories in the Bible. If you read the Bible in a way that takes it literally, or picks and chooses, you can start to think that the most horrendous violence against women is okay. And you can blame homosexuality for it in some instances. So according to Tribble, these stories bind us in a Trinitarian act that unites writer, text, and reader. And because we are the reader and we're still here, the biblical text still has something important to say to us. The thing about the text of terror, and that's TEXTS, is our tendency to try to find some kind of happy ending for them. We also can look for the simple and literal answer. Or we think of God in the Hebrew Bible as the mean one and the God in the Gospels as the nice one. We can make all the hard things disappear in either blaming the struggle of the cross or even the light of the resurrection. But these stories, these texts of terror, they have a life of their own and still have plenty to say. And I struggle with them. And I have more questions than answers. The story of Abraham about to sacrifice Isaac because God told him to is an important story. And there are volumes and volumes written about this, and no one can find an answer. No one can find rhyme or reason. I do think it is important to know, however, that child sacrifice was abhorrent to the Israelites. Abraham knew this, God knew this, Abraham knew that God knew this. So there was at least some confidence, I think anyway, on Abraham's part that God was not going to go through with it. Even though child sacrifice was a common practice in some of the neighboring nations. Other nations had a lot of gods, while Israel only had one. Abraham knew this, and so his response to Isaac was, God himself will provide the lamb for a burnt offering, my son. So I think that Abraham knew that this was some kind of test, or at least I want to believe that. It's a test because God did not know if Abraham was faithful or not. In some of the other readings about Abraham, we can see some behavior that's also difficult to think about. But Isaac was the most precious person in Abraham's sight. He was the future. One interpretation is even to ask, who did Abraham love more, God or Isaac? But I can tell you right now that I would fail right here. This is not a test I would do well on. Who is more important than your child? It is unfortunate that some parents think religion and what that religion teaches about being gay means that they disown their child. And sometimes what society thinks or some of the extended family think is more important. But because it is Pride Sunday, I'm going to tell you a little bit about my parents. My parents are part of a faith tradition that teaches that marriage is between a man and a woman only. that gay people should be celibate. Gay people who are not celibate are committing some kind of mortal sin, will go to hell, and cannot receive Eucharist. And this faith is something they take extremely seriously. But when it became clear to them that I am gay and that it was not a phase, they made a choice. I am much more important to them than the rules and structures and systems that say that I don't count, which unfortunately includes their church. They have celebrated my committed relationship, and they love and accept a child from our relationship as their own grandchild. And I think I take for granted, and we may as well, that yeah, they should do that, but they don't have to. They come and they celebrate me now and then at my Episcopal church. They receive Eucharist, which their tradition does not accept. And they don't feel guilty about any of this at all. So I have to say, I'm so exceedingly pleased that and proud that St. Simon's is doing this work. What you do here, what you learn here and celebrate as a church goes way beyond the walls. And I think that that's so amazing and awesome. And also because statistically, someone here is or is going to have a child that is lesbian, gay, transgendered, or bisexual. And maybe the test that came to my parents will come to you. Who do you love more? And the words love the sin and hate the sinner are empty when your child is absent from your life. What I do think is true is that God's love for us knows no bounds, and that God learns about who we are as we learn about who God is. It is the good shepherd's flock that is missing sheep. If diversity is not here, go and find it. A congregation that is not diverse is missing part of the goodness of God's creation. Because it is about following Jesus, because he is always going to look for the ones who are missing. So invite, interact, connect, keep doing it, keep fighting the fight. Have conversations, do things together, be in relationship with people who are so different from you. Now, there's another part of this story that really bothers me. I can't understand here why everyone is so silent. Abraham is about to sacrifice his son, but he walks silently. The child allows himself to be tied up, and he is silent as his father takes out a knife. And I tell you right now, I would be screaming. God is silent too, as this whole drama plays itself out. There are clearly so many things wrong with the silence. And it is a silence that I've heard at least a few times. One time comes to mind when I was on the metro on my way to Chicago early one morning. It was rush hour, and the train was full to the max. The conductor walks around and gets your ticket and punches a hole in it to indicate that you've ridden that morning. So I presented my ticket to the conductor, and he started to punch it, and he said really loudly, "What are you, a man or a woman?" And he said some other stuff that was along those lines that I can't remember anymore. But the train car was absolutely silent. No one said anything, including me. It took a bit, but I got over some of my shock and I started to get angry. When we got to the Union Station, I found that the conductor was talking to a policeman. I went up to him and I told him how inappropriate what he did was. But he and the policeman weren't impressed. I got no acknowledgement, no apology. So later I wrote a letter to the conductor's supervisor, and I also didn't receive a reply. So much disregard for the life of another human being. So much silence. When injustice occurs, we cannot be silent. And I'm speaking to all of you as a person of color and a queer person. Please do something. You're people with a voice, people with power, people of privilege. Please do something. Don't be silent. Injustice for one is injustice for all. We are not just individuals. Protest, speak, sign petitions, wear a mask, vote, pray. You have your gifts. And if you can do more, do more. In our own Episcopal Church, something major is missing. Many in our church advocate strongly for LGBTQIA rights, but something important is not there. It is a marriage right. It is how our church does separate but equal. The problem with that is that separate is not equal. There are some dioceses within the Episcopal Church that do not allow same-sex marriage, others that will not approve the marriage rights that have been approved by the General Convention, which is the lawmaking body of the Episcopal Church. There are still others that give extra requirements before blessing a same-sex marriage as opposed to a heterosexual marriage. And it is extremely sad to me that some in our own church do not allow me and others to take part in the grace of the blessing of a marriage. And whatever diocese you are in, my marriage rite is not in the Book of Common Prayer, or at least not yet. So do not be silent. Please do something. So if you think that God tests, and sometimes I wonder if God does, then maybe this is the test. Or at least these are the standards against which we are held. Love God with all your heart and mind and soul, with every ounce of strength that you have. And love your neighbor as yourself. If these are the standards that you adhere to, there is no test that you can fail. You will know that the love of God and your neighbor will always, always be the highest thing, because it is the work of our lives. Silence in the face of injustice does not stand a chance in front of God. The cross is evidence of that. No violence, no unhealthy demand or relationship, no injustice can ever stand against God's love for us or our love of God and neighbor. Thanks be to God.